Recording.
Okay.
All right, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. If you want to go ahead with your name, major, year.
Oh, sorry, I forgot about that. My name's Roselyn. I'm a freshman, and my major is telecommunications.
My name's Josh. I'm a pre-law major, criminal justice and philosophy, and I'm a freshman as well. What was your hometown or neighborhood like growing up?
I'm actually from one of the last towns in America to ever have a KKK rally. My mom was like old enough to remember it when it happened. So we're very not a great place. There's a lot of racism and like very conservative values.
How has that affected your political views growing up?
My parents themselves and like my family aren't like that. Um, my dad's very liberal. My mom's very liberal, and they sort of like talked about it. And they didn't really ever explain like racism or anything to me when I was a kid, but they just like made sure that I didn't adopt the same like prejudices, or they tried to make sure I didn't adopt the same prejudices as everybody from where I'm from.
Sure. Okay. Have you experienced or witnessed any racism in your life?
Um, I haven't seen anything like horrible. Um, at my school, there was only one black girl in my whole grade, and in like sophomore year, I think, our teacher, we were reading, oh my God, what was that book? Like that really famous book. I can't remember the name of it, but it has the N word in it. And keep in mind, she's the only black person in that classroom. And our teacher is like, Jayla's gonna let us say it, right? And like the whole class just went silent. And she was like, yeah. And afterwards, we were kind of close at the time, not like terribly. And she was like, I really hated that. I really wish that hadn't happened. But
Sure.
other than that, I can't think of anything else. I'm sure I saw stuff and just didn't realize what it was because I wasn't paying close enough attention.
The race relations / race issues at Ball State.
That was really garbled, and I only got like the last two words. Could you say that again?
How would you describe race relations and race issues at Ball State?
Um, I wouldn't say that there's like a horrible amount of tension on campus, and I wouldn't say that the administration themselves are doing like a horrible job when it comes to it. But I know that my roommate, who is black, has had some issues, not horrible, just with like getting in trouble when like other white students with for things that like white students would be doing that they wouldn't get in trouble for, or like other stuff like that. But I wouldn't say that I know that much about how the Ball State like administration is actually and staff handles race and racism and like race relations at the school.
Sure. Do you think from what you do know, do you think Ball State has done a good job of uh, decent standing with all the students?
Um, I wouldn't say they've done the best job, especially because after all of like the Trumpies were like going around campus and threatening minority students, it took them like 2 days for them to send out an email, and even then it wasn't that great. But I wouldn't say that they've done a horrible job. And the second part of the question, I could not make out. It was very garbled on my end.
No, that's fine. That answered it. What's this course meant for you personally?
Personally, this course has like helped me understand the historical aspects of white supremacy and sort of like where like all of the prejudice and racism has come from specifically in America, and how like our systems have continued to allow it to happen, and how like the majority of the public has gone along with it and not necessarily tried to stop it. There's only been like a few, compared to like the size of America, there hasn't been that many people um, trying to help. And it's sort of like helped me understand why historically that has been happening.
What's the biggest thing that you are going to take from this class moving forward?
I think the biggest thing I'm going to take from this class is that it's not simple. Like nobody's ever going to be able to just snap their fingers and make race and prejudice like go away. Not racism and prejudice go away. Like I can't remember what, but I remember in one of the readings there was this quote, or maybe we discussed it in class. I really can't remember, but it was talking about how racism is like water and how it gets into everything and how it seeps through all the cracks. And that's sort of like put to light how it is, because there's so many issues within it. Like it goes all the way from hate crimes to microaggressions to just people preferring different skin tones. And I don't know, it helped me understand that like it's a very, very complex issues, and all of the issues within it are very, very complex, and it's not simple.
Yeah. Uh, that being said, where do you see our country 5 or 10 years from now regarding racism?
5 or 10 years from now, I want to say we're either going to be like worse off than we were like at the beginning of this year, and like sort of how all of the hate crimes and things got a lot worse because of Donald Trump. We're either going to go farther down that road, or it's going to get better. And there's actually going to be things done to like help the criminal justice system, help the prison system, help neighborhoods that are getting, forgot the word, oh no, gentrified, helping gentrified neighborhoods and like things like that. And I sort of see us progressing, but I don't see us progressing as much as we need to within the next 5 or 10 years.
Do you think's like the number one thing that can be done to help us progress?
Ideally, I think the number one thing to help us progress would be discussing racism to young kids and including it in some sort of history lesson, or just talking about it differently. The way that we discuss slavery isn't the best in public schools. And it sort of all comes down to education, but that's not probably ever going to happen because people have turned racism into like a politicized argument when it shouldn't be. So I guess I think the best thing we can do is educate one another and discuss it with one another and make it so that it's not an uncomfortable topic, and like it becomes everybody becomes more educated because everybody talks to each other more.
Sure. What do you think inhibits Americans from having those conversations amongst each other?
I think a lot of it stems from the fact that white people, myself included, it's incredibly uncomfortable to talk about race. Number one, because even if you are anti-racist, you are still afraid, like that you don't know how to approach the subject, or you really don't want to offend somebody, or you really don't want to sound uneducated, so you don't discuss it, or you don't know how to talk about it with your white friends and white family members, and they're really ignorant on it. So when you discuss it with them, it just sort of gets into an argument. like different things like that. I think it just boils down to the fact that white people, it's uncomfortable and they don't want to deal with that. So really the only places it gets discussed is in fairly liberal places and minority communities.
Do you think this class did a good job of making those?
I could not make out what you said at the end of that question.
Do you think this class made or did a good job of making those conversations less uncomfortable?
Yes, I do. I think that the way that it was framed and like the fact that we had like specific readings before going into it, that it was a lot easier to talk about the things in it. Mainly because it was like a classroom setting and everybody knew why we were there, and like we knew that we were supposed to be discussing race. It wasn't like a dinner party and your best friend just made a racist joke and you're too afraid to like talk about it in front of like 7 other people. But I think that because of that setting and because of the professor, it was a lot easier to discuss the things that it would be like more uncomfortable to talk about in just like regular settings.
Do you think that the class similar?
I couldn't hear anything you said out of that one.
Do you think a class similar to this should be a university requirement?
Yes, but I don't think it'll ever happen because of like people turning racism into a political issue instead of a human rights issue. But yes, I do, and I think that it should be required on like all forms of education.
Do you, in your personal experience, found that the majority of white people are scared of the idea of racism because it would mean giving up their perceived power?
I wouldn't say that it's a conscious thing. I would say that the majority of white people, I don't think anybody will ever really want to admit it, but like if you notice in like um, films that have like minority, like predominantly minority characters, like Black Panther or I forgot the name of it, the movie with the peach, Parasite. Even though those are blockbuster films and like really popular, they still got a massive amount of hate, predominantly from white people. And like they never would come out and say, "Oh, it's because the cast is from Korea. Oh, it's because the cast is all Black." They were just like picking apart the movies like horribly and saying that they were horrible movies because I think deep down they did feel threatened, and I think deep down they don't understand or not understand, they don't want to feel like they aren't the main characters, like they aren't the ones who deserve all the movies and deserve to feel represented in all the movies. And I think that applies to like real life situations. Just the movies, it's a easier way to describe it.
Sure. In addition to this class, have the recent events in our country changed your understanding and views of racism at all?
Yes, mainly because like before the murder of George Floyd and before all of the protests, I like wasn't racist and I was like trying to educate myself a little bit, but I wasn't doing enough and I didn't really understand like how much our systems contribute to racism and prejudice in America. And then after like everything that happened with George Floyd and then the Breonna Taylor case and like seeing that those two people didn't get justice after like we have like videotape of them literally publicly killing him, and then with her like she was shot like 8 times by police in her own house and the people still got off, And like after like seeing those cases, I sort of realized like, oh, like our criminal justice system is set up so that murderers get to go free. And then it sort of like snowballed into me like looking and reading more and trying to just understand more about everything that's happening.
Sure. What do you think needs to be done politically? Like, what movements need to be done amongst the lawmakers to help reduce racism?
I think a lot of it comes down to our police system and our prison system. Obviously, like defund the police is a very thrown about phrase, but not a lot of people who are against it understand what it means. And I think that like defunding the police in the sense of giving money to like other community foundations and stuff is what needs to happen to start like not getting rid of racism, but like, you know, controlling its effects on people of color and like how much it can actually harm them. And then it has to do more with like educating people and just discussing what it is to try to get rid of the like more social and like prejudice aspects rather than the physical ones.
Where do you see yourself 10 years from now, and how do you think you can improve as an anti-racist?
I think something that I definitely need to get better at is like whenever something happens, like whenever another person of color is shot by the police, like I really don't want to think about it because obviously it makes me sad. And I just sort of like don't pay attention to it until everybody's paying attention to it. And that's like a major flaw. Like I have to pay attention to it and I need to start just like doing more to spread that awareness and doing more to pay attention and doing more to like talk to the people around me and going to protest more and like donating if I can, or just like individual things that I can do um, at like a small personal level.
Sure. Well, that's all I got. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
I don't think so. No.
All right.